Vladimir Kagan. I am currently serving as the president here at Kendall College of Art and Design of Ferris State University. Before I introduce our guests and get this rolling, I'm going to apologize because the pizza was supposed to be here already. So we'll do an intermission when the pizza lunch arrives. I know that is not why you came. But yeah, timing is everything. We were kind of waiting, and then I thought, well, we should just get started because now we're getting restless. So it is my pleasure to welcome Chris Eitel from Vladimir Kagan Design Group. I have a few notes I got here and was asked to do the welcome. I do know Chris. We are super excited to hear more about Chris's journey from Kendall to Kagan, and I am going to turn it over from here.
Thanks, and there's a lot of chairs up front, so don't be shy, come on in up. My name is Gail DeBryan, I'm chair of the Collaborative Design Program, the Masters in Design Program. Really, there's a lot of chairs right up front with a table for the pizza when it comes. And it's my pleasure to be able to host this little show. And to thank Tara for providing the pizza when it gets here. Also, I'm going to thank Macomb Community College and the Lorenzo Cultural Center, because that is why Chris is here. This is sort of a flyby on the way. So we were invited to give a talk tomorrow for their Creative Michigan Making the Mitten Modern series. And so on the way, Chris said, hey, I really miss Kendall. How about we stop in and I'll tell a story about what we're doing at the Kagan Design Group and share some of those serendipitous connections between what I was doing at KCAD as a student, the importance of an internship, and participating in design competitions, and how this informs my everyday work. And I said, sure. So I said, Terry, please can we home? And she said, that'd be great. I'll buy the pizza. So this is why we are here. I get to be the moderator. I'll see what I can do. Chris put together this beautiful slideshow, and he's going to begin with some other surprises and delights. He's got lots of surprises and delights. We are filming this, so you should know that, for lots of reasons. And when it comes to the Q&A, which I'll save plenty of time at the end, I will run around with the mic, just like Oprah, so that your questions can be heard. Because we want to make sure we hear what you have to ask. And there is, he's going to talk about a book. And there are some here for sale. And he will do a signing if you would like a signature. And that is important to know. Anything else that's a preview thing? Okay. So that said, I'll let you start.
All right. So my name is Chris Eitel. I'm the design director at Vladimir Kagan Design Group. You know that already. But what some of you might not know is who Vladimir Kagan is and his significance in furniture design and interior design. And so when I started with Vladdy, early on there was a nonprofit documentary organization called Checkerboard Films, and they started to shoot a film on him. It's a 37-minute film. We will not watch the whole film today, but you can find it. I believe it's going to be on their website. You can search it on Amazon, and it's like a $5 or something to find him. So I will show you the trailer to that film, and it gives a nice introduction to Vladdy. If you knew Vladimir, you called him Vladdy, and so throughout the talk when I mentioned Vladdy, that's who I'm talking about. But it gives a nice introduction to Vladdy, so we will just back up here.
In my work, most important feature is still my drawing. I conceptualize with a pencil and pen and markers, and the first impression is the best design, and it becomes ultimately the goal to work toward that. I have a young assistant named Chris Eitel. Takes my freehand drawings, interprets them into the computer. Chris developed a computer rendering. It's been a pleasure to work on this because every day it morphs a little bit more, becomes a little bit more detailed, moves a little bit more away from the computer modeling, and becomes a real piece of sculpture.
He wanted his legacy, I think, to be more about the art form of it. And God knows there's an art form in all the pieces that he does, but specifically that they would be viewed as artistic and not just as a piece of furniture. And I think he captured that. I think he did that well. I think Vladdy was an artist, and he showed it all to us the last 4 years of his life.
He was working for a long time. He went through periods of being almost forgotten, then through periods of incredible fame. I think he's going to be evaluated as an important master of American modern furniture. Specifically in the field of residential design, the great ones, the Eameses, George Nelson, Bertoia, they didn't really design for the home in those years. Kagan's furniture stays as an interesting counterpoint, which corroborates the modern movement and also expands it in a different, very personal direction.
So what I say is, if you live long enough, good things happen. And as a final note, no amount of careful planning can replace good luck.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to start by saying, so Vladimir Kagan's been a friend of the college for many years. There were many Kendall students who were interns for Vladimir. Are there any in the house? Any other people who were interns for Vladdy? Okay, there were some who were invited. And Chris, you were intern what years?
Summer of 2013.
And you graduated shortly thereafter?
I did, yes.
It's after. I want to do a Who's Chris minute.
Okay.
Okay. Why KCAD? My favorite question. What brought you here? How'd you get here?
So I wanted to be an architect, truth be told. But I didn't get into architecture school when I was out of community college, which I started at a community college, so that's kind of why I'm here to talk to the Macomb Community College students. And so I didn't get into architecture programs, tried and tried, but it just wasn't happening. And I thought, furniture is not dissimilar to architecture. I enjoyed crafting and doing things with my hand. And so I came to Kendall on a trip with my parents. I'm from Missouri, so it was like a 9-hour trip to get here. And when I got here, I fell in love with how Kendall taught furniture design. It wasn't just like being in a wood shop constantly, which I thought was what I was going to get into, but it was a deep understanding of history of design. Grand Rapids, we talked about this last night, Grand Rapids is furniture city still, in my opinion. And so the way that we were taught, the way that we learned how to design furniture was very important to me, and I was really attracted to the kind of deep understanding that Kendall offered its students.
Very good answer. Give you an A. And Vladimir Kagan received an honorary doctorate from KCAD in 2001, so like yesterday. Shortly thereafter, he invited us to go on a little excursion to Milan to exhibit student work at the Milan Salon de Sorte, which was a fascinating experience. Are any of you in the house? Some of our alumni went with us. You weren't even here yet. That was in 2002. And an international exhibition is a really fascinating project. If invited, you should try. So he's been very influential to us throughout the years, and so we've really appreciated all of that connection that he's made for us. How did you get the internship? Coercion?
Yeah. No, I have a funny kind of story about how I was hired for it.
Yeah. But you were paid.
I was paid.
Which I am wholeheartedly that person. Internships should be paid. So you're going to tell that story.
Yeah, so...
Maybe I'm out of order, but you take it.
No. So you guys kind of got an introduction to Vladimir Kagan. That's what this slide was. Some of these designs up here, he designed early on in the 1950s, and they're still very popular designs today. I think that's kind of what proves that they are timeless. So I will go to the next slide. I do have a clicker here. I don't have to stand over there, guys. So my internship was, believe it or not a lot of furniture design. All those projects that Vladdy had planned were like teaching me to sail, and we went on he had this old Model T that you see here in the bottom middle of the screen, and the second week that we were there, we took his Model T to Williamsburg, Virginia, and went on a 2-week Model T tour with a bunch of Model T'ers that are scattered throughout the United States. We did a class building model sailboats, which you see up there. That's a half-hull model of his sailboat. We fixed lights around the house. We did a lot. We threw dinner parties. We went to cocktail parties. It was just a lot of hanging out and kind of get to know one another. And about like a month in, or a month and a half in, I'm like, are we gonna design any furniture? Like, you're this furniture master, and here I am, like, sailing every day. And which was fun, don't get me wrong, but he just didn't have a bunch of projects coming through. But finally he did have a custom furniture, or a custom sofa design that came through with an interior designer, and you see my first 3D model attempt at that there in the lower corner. And so that was my internship. And you want me to keep going? Okay.
So, yeah, I think so.
So at the end of my internship, Vladdy was like, Chris, you know, I think that we've had a lot of fun and we're starting to get into designing some furniture. What do you say you just stick around?
And then what did I say?
Gail said, don't just stick around. I had 1 semester left here at Kendall before I could apply for my degree, my bachelor's degree. I was the first student to graduate with a bachelor's degree in my family, so it was very important to my mom at least, and Gail, and I think Monty maybe, who's here in the crowd.
You sure Monty said no, I get back here?
And so I came back for a semester at KCAD. So in this semester, I took some courses, my kind of final courses, and there were a couple projects that stuck with me throughout the course of this entire lecture that you're going to see today. One of them is the Bein and Stock coffee table. If you're a furniture design student, you're probably familiar with the Bein and Stock competition. And in 2013, 2014, they held a coffee table competition. And I was coming back from my internship, and I was really inspired by Vladimir's omnibus collection, which utilized lucite to float the seats of the sofa. It was this magical moment that he would call in furniture design, and he always tried to do something fun like that. Float the piece of furniture, cantilever it out. And I was really inspired by that. So the omnibus collection is a 36-piece sectional collection. It's massive. It doesn't have a coffee table. So bringing some sort of a design into that collection was very intriguing to me. So I came up with this design. This is kind of the first run-through concept of it.
Did it win?
And it won the competition.
How much did you win?
At that time, they gave you $10,000, so I could pay off my student loan. Well, part of it. The second...
Remember that number, we're going to come back to that number in a minute.
The second piece of furniture I did that was something that has stuck with me over time, did it in Bob Marsh's class. Hey, Bob. And it is, at the time I called it the perching stool, and it is this one that you see here. And that will come back into play later on down the line. And then the last thing I did was I graduated, which was an accomplishment.
Got gold cords on it.
Yeah, gold cords. So after I still working here. After I interned, or after I came back from school, I was here maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and Vladdy and I were keeping in touch, and he called me up and he said, Chris, I'm working on some furniture designs. This concept of a limited edition art furniture is what he called it. And he was like, I'd love it if you would come and meet back up with me at my home in Palm Beach, and we will work on these designs. So I flew to Palm Beach that winter, and I think it was like, we had 2 days to put together a presentation of all of his art furniture concept sketches, and we went to Art Basel Miami, and we met with Ralph Pucci, who at the time was representing the Kagan Classic Collection, and we met with Carpenter's Workshop Gallery, who was an up-and-coming gallery in the world, I guess. And they were both interested in this idea that Vladdy had for this said art furniture. And that began my apprenticeship with Vladimir Kagan. Over the course of the next year, we went back to Nantucket. We met Zaha Hadid to ask her to write a foreword for this book that Gail is mentioning, which will come back into play later. This is the 3rd edition of the book. We asked her to write the foreword for the 2nd edition. And she said yes. And we began work on some of the projects you see up there in the top hand of the screen. So the art furniture, the GG chair was one of them, and the Honesty collection. And, we can get into that a little bit.
So how many of you went with us in the winter snowstorm to the Broad Museum and saw, yeah, okay. So you understand Zaha's work, and you see some resemblances probably, yeah.
So I want to get into some of the projects that we did during that apprenticeship, and some of the processes that we took in doing them. So I'm going to start with the GG chair. The GG chair has a sister chair called the Gabriella. Vladimir's granddaughter, Gigi, or her full name, Gabriella, was what the chair was named after. We did 2 versions, a wood version, which you're going to see here, and we did a cast bronze version. And the trick was, Vladimir is, at this time, 84 years old, 86 years old, sorry. And the trick was trying to figure out what is in this guy's head and making it a reality. And so his sketches were very loose, and my job was to interpret these loose sketches into something tangible. And it was a big back and forth series between him sketching, me interpreting, him overlaying in another sketch, me interpreting that, putting it into the computer, doing a 3D model, taking screenshots, him overlaying that, and kind of this wash, rinse, repeat cycle is what we called it. And it felt like we were getting nowhere, but we were making little progress on it. We finally made our first prototype, and we made it straight from the computer model. And it was, as the guys in the wood shop called it, a toothpick. It was just completely out of scale. It looked good in the model, but just completely out of scale. And Vladdy was getting kind of frustrated with the time that it took to program this and design it, and he was for sure that we could build it in the shop by hand. And so we kind of went back to the drawing board and we started building one by hand, which you see photos of us over here on the left-hand side of the screen. And what we ended up getting was a chair that was in a great scale, but it lacked all this intricate detail that we could get with computer modeling and then machining it. And so him, frustrated again, was kind of ready to give up, and I was like, I have an idea. If you give me just one more chance and let me kind of take this over and do the project. And he agreed to that. And so I took both models and I started essentially from scratch for a third time, and I started remodeling it. Modeling something that was to the scale that we had created in the wood shop, and but still had some of this detail that we could get from machining it. And as to not waste a bunch of time and money in going straight into making it in wood, we decided to invest in a cheap little 3D printer. And what we did was we printed out half of the chair in 6-inch sections, because that's as tall as our printer could print, and we glued them together. And we were able, I think you see at the top there, kind of the relationship that we're able to start building between what is in our computer and what our ideas are, and how that's translating into real life. And so in the bottom right-hand corner, you get me inspecting the final chair frame.
Love that story. That little hack. 3D printing 6-inch sections. Very clever.
So what's cool about that process is when we did the process to create the bronze version of this, it was entirely different. We didn't use the computer except for trying to kind of find a scale. And then we worked with a master sculptor in the Ralph Pucci studio to create a chair entirely out of clay. And then we cast it into fiberglass, which you see here, the fiberglass mold, and we could set the seat in, and we could kind of understand how it's sitting, because chair frames are important to look beautiful, but it's also important that they sit somewhat comfortably. So this is a little bit about that process. And then once we were done here, we went in and they casted it in bronze. They casted it from a foundry in France. I never made it over there to see the foundry, but I did get to see the chair come back. The story about this chair, well, I'll keep going on to the next process. So the last of the pieces collection was for the Carpenter's Workshop Gallery. They are a French gallery, but they have galleries all over the world. And the designs for this were extremely complicated. There was a sofa that was mostly built out of this kind of clad wood idea, and tables and consoles that were cast in bronze and in aluminum, and they were really meant to focus mostly on form and less on the actual ergonomics and comfort. Yes, we built some of that into the sofa, but it was mostly how do we create a sculptural piece of art, because we were making art furniture. And so this is a little bit of the process here. None of these pieces were conducive to 3D printing. But when you look back at some of Vladdy's friends, like Wendell Castle, and you think about that little boat model that we made when I was an intern and how we stacked up layers and carved it away, that was what we started to do to create patterns for molds that could be cast later on. So here you see us kind of working away in stack laminating blue foam, carving it away. Vladdy and I there in the center working on a full-scale detail of the sofa so that we could put everything in the computer, get somewhat close to what we were looking for, and then slice that all up to make patterns to layer up our I guess, patterns, and then try to cast from there. So back to the chair. So we do all of this development, right? And we get pretty much done with everything. I mean, we're waiting for the final wood GG chair to come back. The cast bronze Gabriella chair is on its way from France. We are about 80% done with the Odyssey collection and building kind of first mock-ups and prototypes for that. And we were ready to debut this chair, and on April 7th in 2016 I got a phone call the day before the launch and debut of the first of these designs, and Vladimir had passed away with a heart attack sudden in the night. And it was like a shock through not just our company, but through the design world. I remember at his memorial service, there was like 450 people show up for it. I mean, it was massive. And so his family overnight inherits this business, and is like, the next day we're debuting the Gabriella chair for Ralph Pucci in Miami, and they decide we need to go through with it. We want to do the debut. We want to finish the Honesty collection. We want to launch that, and so that's what we did. So these are some shots from the debut of the Gabriella chair, and these are some shots from the debut of the Honesty collection in their new gallery in New York. So that sofa is insanely hard to build, but we did it. The console on the back wall here was very tricky as well, because it floats off the wall, and it only really connects to the wall on the downward part. And we ended up doing it in aluminum and kind of creating this sort of mechanism where it can sit down and rotate a little bit and lock into place. And the coffee table is a cast bronze coffee table.
It weighs how much?
These are very expensive.
It weighs.
Oh, I thought you said and costs how much. I was like, those are, yeah. It weighs a lot. It definitely does. The sofa actually comes in parts, so you can undo the upholstery underneath the seat here and go underneath it and ratchet out and pull the entire seat out for shipping it, which is important to be able to ship furniture. And then you can put it back together wherever you go. So
I want to ask a question. What does sailing have to do with this? No, go back to the picture. Yeah, no. Okay. That one.
Sailing's about having fun. And that's what this was about. When we were creating these designs, I mean, that was when when I really felt like I got this like master apprentice experience. Like when I was an intern, it was not what I was expecting. It was not what I was thinking I was going to get. I had like high aspirations about it, but it was about building that relationship so that later on, it takes a lot of trust to work with somebody right next to you every single day, to live with them, to have breakfast with them in the morning and dinner with them at night, and to understand the language of design that he was trying to teach.
You would check in pretty often, and you called yourself his wingman quite a bit.
Yeah, that's what he called me at the end of my internship. He was like, Chris isn't my intern, he's my wingman, because I literally went everywhere with him.
Because he needed assistance.
He needed assistance. So Vladimir had a condition called spinal stenosis, which allowed him to not walk without 2 sticks. So creating this and crawling around and carving it away is hard enough for somebody at 86 years old, but even more hard to do when you can't really walk that well. So
I also see sailing forms in the line of the work.
Yeah, line work was an important philosophy for him. We would take his little whaler out into the harbor and look at all the mega yachts that would be parked there, and we would talk about the lines of a design. And he was constantly talking about it. It didn't matter if it was this picture or a yacht or a piece of furniture. He was constantly talking about seeing the lines and how do those lines sculpt and how do they carve.
The visual literacy that was part of the sailing process was part of the teaching of the internship,
Yes,
as well as the delight.
as well as a delight.
I'll let you continue.
So, after Vladimir passed away, his family realized that they couldn't or didn't want to run this business. And he had been in conversation with Holly Hunt, who was a good friend of his, about his legacy and where that belongs in furniture design and the history. And he felt that her company and her showrooms could best carry that legacy on. And so she purchased Vladimir Kagan, and we debuted, the same night that we debuted the Honesty collection in New York, in her new flagship showroom in London, they made the announcement that they had acquired Vladimir Kagan Design Group. And we launched the GG chair, which is the wood version of the chair we've been working on for Holly Hunt that night. So that's how that ties in.
Great. And then what happened?
And then
Maybe I'm jumping ahead.
we kept going. Let me see what the next slide is.
I'm going to check time. I think I smell pizza. I'm not going to say that out loud.
I missed a slide. I missed adding a slide.
Oh, yeah.
And then we designed a lot of stuff for Holly Hunt. And Holly came to me and she said, Chris, we got to do some new things, which was very intimidating. I'm 28 years old at the time, and I'm just taking over as the design director for Kagan without Kagan, and they want to do new things. So we didn't do any new things. We were left with an incredible archive from Vladdy, and in order to do new stuff, I wanted to understand more about where we came from. So I dove into this archive, and we started releasing reintroductions of furniture. A couple years ago, right after COVID, we were able to release some of the first like bigger things, bigger kind of storytelling that we wanted to do. And so we released designs from different decades of Kagan, so from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then later on, the following year, we dove into designs that were focused on certain eras. And in doing all this, we were allowing ourselves time to do what Holly wanted us to do, which was tell a news story and tell what's next. And I totally smell pizza, and I think there's a good stopping point to maybe get some pizza before we go into all of that. So
Let's do it. Chris is in charge. Grab some pie and white, whatever that means.
yeah, if that's a thing,
That ain't a thing.
just tell your
Anyway, come back. All right, so, Chris,
Um,
what's next?
So what's next? We pick up our story here on what Holly wanted for the Kagan brand, and that was to do something new. We've been diving into our archives and all of that, and we're here. So there was a second edition of a coffee table book that I had mentioned that we had Zaha Hadid write the foreword to. At the end of that coffee table book, Vladdy just introduces this idea of doing this art furniture, but it doesn't cover any of that. And so we decided to publish a third edition of the coffee table book, and in that I've written an afterword to it, and it is the story kind of that you just heard. And it goes, it covers the development of those late works of him, and it touches on what I'm about to talk about next. So when you have an afterword, it's nice to have a foreword, and that is the collection that I designed. The next collection you see, it represents where we are at Kagan and how we are moving forward with our designs, but how we're also continuing to tell that story and that legacy, because these designs come from somewhere. They're not just made up to look like Kagan. So we have an afterword, and now we have a forward collection. So you remember that coffee table that I designed early on, that bind and stock coffee table that was very inspired by Vladdy and his work. We go in and we kind of re-engineer it a little bit. We find some flaws in the original design, and we improve on them. And we launched this as kind of the beginning point for the forward collection, because it was one of the beginning points for me and for where designs that were inspired by Vladdy come from. So this is a photograph that we did during our marketing campaign, and one thing I want to point out is you'll see that the photograph's black and white, and in the background of this is that omnibus, a part of that omnibus sofa. So what we have in front of it is the color, table in color. So we are kind of like putting in these classic pieces in our marketing campaign that inspire and pull through to help launch this collection. Maybe originally you might remember this box that floated into this coffee table had a hinged lid. It's much better to have it lift off and flip over and become a tray and kind of fit into this little detail that runs around it. You might notice on the edge here, the leg kind of comes up through the top. That really helps us lock everything in place so that we can design this entire table with no glue joints. It's all just slipped together. Legs go in, the box goes in, the top goes on, the top of the box goes on. And that's how we can put it together, we can ship it easier, make our lives easier. For interior designers in the room, you get to choose your own leather or upholstery or whatever you might want to line the box. It's nice to offer, interior designers are our clients, so it's nice to offer them some options there.
This is my favorite question now.
Okay.
What's the list price on this baby?
It's, do you want me to say it? It sells for $60,000.
And what's my designer discount?
Well, you don't get one.
See? So you remember the price? And so there you go.
That stool that I designed really early on and I was kind of exploring this dynamic line work, became a stool that I explored how to understand Kagan. So, how is Kagan carved? What is his philosophies in ergonomics? That is what we explored and what I did. So I used that design. I don't know, I probably made 6 or 7 iterations of this throughout the past decade of working at Kagan just to understand his language. And so we launched that as a part of the collection. And you see behind it a bunch of dining chairs that are classic Kagan pieces that kind of also inherit that same form and that same understanding of wood carving. We do a love seat, an open back version and a closed back version. It's a wood clad love seat that is symmetrical this time. It's something that we can offer at Holly Hunt, who is our parent company now. But it has a direct relationship to the Carpenter's Workshop Gallery Honesty sofa and some other wood-clad sofas that we were doing at the time. So we're able to kind of hark back into that part of the story. The 312 wood bench is interesting because actually when Holly first bought Kagan and she wanted me to do something new, I designed this bench and we cast it in bronze. And we didn't really say anything about it being new because it was a little bit of a sensitive time. Vladdy had just passed away. We didn't want to just seem like we're doing all this new stuff all of a sudden. And I was young and a little nervous on if any of my designs were going to hold any water for this massive luxury brand. The bronze version of this stool became the #1 selling stool at Holly Hunt and is consistently in the top 10 products for Kagan. So we were confident that it worked, and we relaunched it in a wood version, again kind of harping back to that sculptural element that Kagan has in his wood carving, and kind of helps give that design a home in the forward collection. And the last piece in the collection is what I call the big picture sofa. The idea of what a Kagan sofa, which is what he's known for, what that looks like moving forward without him here to inform us, to look at what he had done in the past. So Kagan had some symmetrical sofas, but he didn't have any that had this poof, which is, we call it a poof, which is what you see on the end of this black and white sofa here. So to create a symmetrical sofa that had that sort of seat extension, it's hard to see in this photograph, but the back or the seat cantilevers out from the back and doesn't have any leg underneath it. It's harks back to that magical moment on how do you do this? There's engineering and you make some prototypes and you figure it out. That's how you do it. But it also needed to look like Kagan. It didn't. I wanted everything in this collection needed to belong. I didn't want it to be something that just stood out and was, different. I wanted it to really continue this kind of legacy and this story that we were trying to create and tell. And so
that is a good and so ending.
that's it.
Because it's that time, that's bewitching moment. So let's throw open some questions. Q&A? Before everyone has to split for other places and/or stick around for portfolio review. And there's one now. Eitel.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you for being here. It's an absolute pleasure. In the moments throughout your journey where you felt stuck, discouraged, maybe the mountain was too high to climb, held back, what got you through those times? How could you keep the faith and keep the creativity flowing when you're feeling stuck?
I guess I never really felt creatively stuck. But that doesn't mean that I didn't feel stuck or didn't feel discouraged or like, why am I making sandwiches right now and not designing furniture? And there are people in this room who got me through that. The network that you create here, that you create out there, those people are people that you lean on in those times. You go to them, you ask them like, hey, I'm not feeling great about this situation I'm in, like, help me see it from a different light. Not unlike a design, maybe, you know? It's nice to have somebody else have some eyes on what's going on. And there are some people in this room, thank you, Monty Simpson, who was definitely there for that, so.
Who's next?
How is the business side of all this?
The business side.
I'm talking about the Miller Knoll side of it.
The Miller Knoll side of it? Miller Knoll side has been great. So some history on that. Kagan was bought by Holly Hunt. Holly Hunt was owned by the Knoll Group, and they recently merged with Miller Knoll. And I feel like at Kagan, we are a brand that they didn't know what to do with, and so they left us alone, and we have been a thriving brand. I mean, from a business standpoint, we're killing it. And for them to kind of see that, I think, and understand that, hey, maybe a hands-off approach is the right way to go about this, has been correct. So far, it's been great.
Did you want to make any professional announcements?
Yeah, I can.
That'd be fine.
I can't officially do this.
Well, we won't tell anybody.
It would have been about a month ago, I took an additional job as the design director at Holly Hunt, in addition to my design director duties at Vladimir Kagan, which means, no, it's, I have a team at Kagan, we have a team, but our team is spread throughout, so we don't have a bunch of designers. We have an office manager, we have a capacity planner, we have a textile associate, we have a COO, and a couple other people. And so at Holly Hunt, it's nice because I have a team of 4 designers and a design manager, and get to work with them in a collaborative way, which is kind of refreshing. One, it's nice to have people bounce ideas off of. Two, it kind of brings me back to my time here, and just being around creatives and having those conversations daily on what you're working on. So yeah, that's what's next, or what's new with me.
Are there still...
Sorry, come back here, I'll be right up.
Sorry. So it sounds like a lot of your design work with Vladimir and now is extending and carrying the torch of his legacy. As a designer, what does that mean in terms of you creating and leaving behind your own legacy?
So I look at it as this is the beginning of my story. Yeah, it's the end of his, and yes, it's carrying on his, but no one's to say that I'm going to be a Kagan forever. And so it's really kind of the start of mine. Obviously, my work personally is influenced by his, and what I'm designing right now needs to go for these brands that I design for. So it's not about like what I want, it's about what fits with our brand and our company. But I think in like 50 years, when I look back at it, I'll be looking back at like this being the beginning of my journey. And Kagan breaks it up into decades. He had his 50s, his 60s, his 70s. He looked at his career that way. And when I look at it, this year marks my first decade. So I had one up here.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, go back there.
I'll be there.
So, did you have to learn technical drawing in addition to your design, or did you pass it off to somebody to do your technical drawings to communicate that to other people, like your casters or your engineers and things like that?
Yeah, I did learn technical design. I learned most of that here and through the coursework that I took. And then, yeah, I didn't pass it off. I did the technical drawings for all this stuff. We do have, well, at Kagan we don't, but at Holly Hunt we have an engineer that looks at our drawings and kind of gives us feedback a little bit. But for the most part, I do those drawings and I expect my designers to do them too.
Michael?
Are you guys still offering internships for students who are still interested?
We do offer internships. We did it for a while just because of COVID and where we were at and everything. And we have gotten back to being able to have some sort of an internship program. At Kagan, it varies a little bit and kind of what we're doing because we are such a small company. For a while, I didn't need one. Now that I'm kind of doing double duty a little bit, the need was there, and so yeah, we do offer it.
So first question is, do your interns go sailing?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
So my second question is, with companies like American Drew, Uttermost, Riverside, some of the smaller, I guess lower brand companies, there was the issue of running into the customer balance being you're designing for the seller, not really the consumer. Have you ran into that situation, and if you have, how do you deal with it?
So my consumer is an interior designer. And yes, the sales associates always have something to say about my design, but I feel that we do our research and we understand who our consumer is, and so I guess we design for them, but we also design for our brand too. So at Kagan we're kind of about storytelling now, or we have been. So the products that we launch, like, they're for our brand. We know that our consumers, they fall in line with what our consumers or our clients want, and it's like, how do we talk about them? How can we build a story to talk about them, so that it's more than just a new chair, but there's like something behind it.
Thanks for coming. That was a really inspiring story and start to your career. I think that's just so cool that you got to do that. And I design furniture too, but not to like this artistic kind of level. I'm just wondering, with these like complex shapes and this super complex upholstery, are you guys able to manufacture this in the States, or is it mostly out of the country?
All of our stuff is manufactured in the States. And in fact, all of our stuff is manufactured in New Jersey, for the most part. So, yeah, Kagan is an American company. Although Vladimir was an immigrant child who came over here with his parents, and if you read the book, he escaped Nazi Germany. He was a Jewish family, escaped Nazi Germany. He was German. They founded the company here in America, and he always considered it to be an American company. And early on, they did all of their manufacturing here, and we still do it today.
So that's a nice way to end, I think, this conversation. Let's give Chris a warm